What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another forecast here by Agent Weather Forecast. And this is going to be a video here on the North Atlantic hurricane season for 2021. So it's going to be a very exciting video for those who love the tropics, and it's definitely going to get a lot more exciting as I'll have my official hurricane season forecast within the next 2 weeks, just before June 1st, which is the official date of when the hurricane season actually starts with the North Atlantic. But today is when the advisories start. So they have actually made the advisories come out as early as May 15th. So definitely, I guess, a pretty good day to make this forecast is going to be number 2 here. But before we get into the models and eventually the maps that I've created, I want to go ahead and tell you guys to subscribe to the channel if you love tropics, as well if you specifically live on the East Coast or even Gulf Coast of the United States, because that's going to be possibly very exciting for you guys this year. So I'll be covering all of that. So I would recommend subscribing, and as well hitting that bell icon so you guys can get notified, and of course smash that like button so I know you guys like videos like these. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So first, let's go ahead and look at the SSTs and exactly how warm these waters are right now across portions of the North Atlantic. And as you guys know, we do have, no longer officially do we have a La Nina right now, according to the 3.4 El Nino region, the Pacific here. We're actually basically at a neutral at this moment here, so that's going to definitely, I wouldn't say play out to be a big factor in, I guess, differences in activity, but definitely it's still a pretty big development. But let's go ahead and look at the waters here. We're actually starting to see some really warm waters, specifically across portions of the Caribbean, getting as warm as 31 degrees Celsius. So definitely getting already, I believe that's nearly 92 degrees. I'm actually not exactly 100% sure. Actually, no, I think that's like 80s. I think that's 80s. That's like mid 80s, I think. So already getting some mid 80s here in Fahrenheit across portions of the SSTs there, across specifically off the Cuba Peninsula there, as well for portions of the Big Island of the Bahamas. But what's going to be really concerning is if these waters continue to warm up across portions of the Carolinas. Obviously, we saw Arthur and Bertha develop in these exact areas because of that Gulf Stream bringing these really warm waters off the east coast of Florida and going up in the Carolinas. So that Gulf Stream that's continuing to strengthen is going to be very concerning for maybe another early start of the season before getting storms before June 1st. But as well, a little concerning here that this MDR continues to get really warm waters. Already, you can kind of see the MDR already getting some pretty significant warm waters, getting up to 20, possibly 28 to possibly as warm as maybe nearly 29 degrees Celsius, which is definitely pretty warm for this time of the year. Usually at this time they're like at 27, which that 1 degree Celsius isn't that big, of difference here. But it's definitely it's still something. I mean, it's still warm. Let's just say that for this time of the year, and as well with this possibly pretty active African monsoon, it would definitely be pretty concerning at this time, because obviously the MDR tends to be pretty active once we get to July, and then obviously through August and September. So definitely be pretty concerning whether we can start getting these MDR storms as early as June. But in general, very warm, specifically Western Atlantic, but as well getting a pretty warm Atlantic as well for portions of the MDR region, and getting as warm as possibly 24, 25 degrees Celsius already up in the Gulf Stream. But really watching out for the warmer waters down there across the southeast coast of the United States and portion of the Caribbean, and the MDR for sure. That'll continue to push these warm waters in the Gulf Stream up into the East Coast here once we get later into June. But that's what we have right now. So definitely already getting some really warm waters, as warm as 31 degrees Celsius already. And I think our warmest was like 33 degrees Celsius last year in like September or October. So it's already starting off on a very warm start in the Caribbean, which is definitely going to be concerning here and possibly could play out a factor whether the MDR does bring in some pretty good amount of storms and they strengthen like they did in 2017. That's going to definitely be something to keep a close eye on. But let's now go ahead and look at the NEO 3.4 region numbers here and what we're at right now. So here's a look now at its latest SSTs and models, or I guess statistics here at this moment. So as you do see, we have rapidly increased here in numbers or values in the 3.4 region index, getting as possibly as high as maybe even a positive neutral there. So we're not getting to an El Nino, but we are definitely seeing a weakening trend within this La Nina. Obviously, earlier this March and even late February, we were at a negative 0.8. Very strong La Nina, which is why really hopes for possibly a very active season have been talked about. Obviously, just because we are only at negative 0.1, so we're basically at a negative neutral or a weak neutral at this point, we are still watching out possibly for a slightly above average season here. So this increase from this to this shouldn't play a big factor from going to extremely active to basically average. It's not going to, that won't be the scenario. And obviously, we still do have possibly trends for a weakening trend in this neutral and going back to La Nina. We still have plenty of time because the season only starts really obviously in 2 weeks, but we have that all the way from November 30th. So obviously there is going to be some concern whether this can bring in a possibility that this La Nina kind of most likely bring or comes back by the time we get into the peak September and October. That's going to be pretty good, big concern. So if we have a neutral throughout the early part of the season there, June and July possibly, and then we kind of go toward a very, very weak La Nina, I say very weak neutral, and then getting eventually to a weak La Nina possibly by September. That's going to be a pretty big concern there for the late season here. Could it be a pattern like last year where we started seeing these storms rolling up in August, September, October, and possibly in November, but possibly a dead start like June and July, or July was not dead, but June definitely was the least active month when you compare it to every other month. Obviously, May, we only had 2 storms, but obviously May technically is not part of the hurricane season officially. So it's definitely going to lead to questions whether this whole thing can affect whether we see a slow start and a rapid end. That's just going to be something we have to wait and see once we get closer, though. So here to look now at the European seasonal here precipitation. So this is also going to give us an idea of whether we'll be seeing an active African monsoon, exactly where we'll be seeing, at least as far as this model goes. Obviously, we can't trust it 100%, but definitely it's going to give us a better idea of whether where we can be seeing our favorable regions in exactly 1 month. So we're going to be going kind of through 3 months. So this is May, June, July 2021 here, and this is looking at the European. I'm looking at the European first because obviously the European does tend to be one of the most accurate or the most accurate model when it comes to tropics. So I think this is definitely our top tier or top-notch model to look at when it comes to this far out. So as you do see, anything from green to blue is above average precipitation. Anything in the brown through red is below average precipitation here. So, and it's going to be in inches here. So it's going to be saying it's that inches amount below average or that much inches above average. Well, obviously, it's going to be kind of more towards tropical rain and tropical systems. So through May, June, and July, obviously we are in May, but we still have June and July left. We are going to be seeing a pretty big trend of precipitation across portions of the MDR. That's going to definitely be concerning here for the early portion of the season. Like I did say, if these SSEs continue to warm up like they are right now, and this trend across the MDR with a 28 to possibly 29 degrees Celsius already, it can possibly be starting to see some early MDR storms as early as June and July. That's going to definitely be a possibility because if we're seeing such favorable conditions precipitation-wise with this African monsoon, and possibly that's going to lead to a lot less Saharan dust and possibly a lot less shear in the Saharan desert, this can definitely be a pretty favorable season for the MDR. But at the moment, anyway, anything earlier than June is going to be very unfavorable, at least according to the European for Western Atlantic development as a result of the very dry atmosphere. But again, obviously, just because this is slightly below average doesn't mean we can't have development. Obviously, we can even have development possibly in this red because obviously their average in these areas are still very, very moist at this time of the year, and obviously the averages really doesn't mean we're not going to be seeing a development. So I just like to clarify that. But overall, even through June, July, and August, we're still seeing some pretty favorable conditions right there in the MDR. Obviously, it can't get too close to the equator because obviously storms can't form in the equator. But the main area of the MDR, like kind of just off just West Central Africa, you can kind of see we're still seeing a lot of below average precipitation in that time period. But as we now go through July, August, and September, that starts to push up a little bit to the north. It's precipitation kind of right to the north of the equator, kind of right here is where we're watching out. So I think this could definitely possibly be an MDR year, not just because of this, but overall, whether we have the African monsoon season and whether we can be seeing a lot less dry air. I think last year was very odd with the amount of dry Saharan dust we saw across the Atlantic. Last year could have definitely been somewhat MDR year, because we saw a lot of systems that could have developed or could have strengthened or could have had a low pressure going, but they just died off because of the Saharan dust, which was caused by the shear. So I think this year can definitely be possibly something to keep a close eye for the MDR code. Throughout all the way from now to May, or from now to October, we're seeing some type of precipitation there above average across Africa, and that can in the MDR, and that definitely has part of the tropical monsoon as well. Once we get to the later into the peak season, we're going to start seeing some above average precipitation there in the Gulf of Mexico, as well that up there in the central Atlantic. And obviously, this still has nothing to do with just because you're in the brown shaded area does not mean we can't have development these months. Obviously, not only is it far out, this is obviously going months out. You can still have storms form when it comes to below average or something like that. Let's go ahead and look at the European monthly. So going one by one so you guys can get a better look. So we're looking at May. We're not looking at overall any favorable conditions really at the moment. Here you see the above average precipitation in the North Atlantic is where we've seen those really cold waters and those warm and those really high amounts of moisture and precipitation of water is going to get really too close to the equator. We're not going to get anything really there at this time of year. As we now go towards July, that's when things change a little bit as this moisture kind of does push up a little bit to the north here. Still a little bit too south, but it can definitely overrun that dry air to the north of that. And once we now get towards August, that's when this moisture is going to be it's going to be perfectly lined up. And we go to September, that's really good there. The location, that's definitely pretty good. As you do see, though, we are seeing a trend up slightly below average precipitation, just less than an inch. So that's still not going to be that bad. So we can see some storms develop kind of right here, and they can go to the west, and they won't die out because obviously there's a lot of brown below that shaded brown. It's kind of just under an inch below average. So it's really basically at that point average. You don't want to see the reds or even the pinks. You want to kind of stick. If you want to have development in any type of area that's in the brown, you want to have anything below the -3 below average in inches wise. But obviously it's basically average at this point. So this whole area is basically somewhat average, whether it's slightly above or slightly below. So either way, so August, September is not looking too shabby at all for MDR, active MDR. If that is the case, we're going to be watching for some big concern for areas of the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, and even possibly for Florida if this were to be an MDR storm or MDR season. Because obviously we saw what 2017 did with the MDR season. Irma, Maria, Harvey, of course, we had Harvey, Jose. We had a ton of big storms there in 2017. Obviously, Irma, Maria, and Harvey, obviously, the top three that were the worst. Obviously, Harvey was the worst for the Gulf of Mexico, but I'd say Maria was definitely the worst for the Caribbean, but Irma was the worst for the possibly strength-wise, not flooding-wise, for the United States. But obviously Harvey was the worst for flooding. But overall, I'm not saying this is going to be 2017 big Category 5s coming from the MDR. I'm just saying this year is going to be a lot more of an MDR year compared to last year. That's what I'm going to say here. I mean, I definitely do see some storms coming off Africa that could be long tracking, maybe one or two that are like major hurricanes in the Caribbean. But obviously, it's way too far out to say anything like that. But obviously, it's still way too far out. Let's now go ahead and look at the CANSIPs, because this one as well is pretty accurate when it comes to being far out. And look at what they're showing. What they're showing is very, very concerning. What CANSIP is showing is from April, May, and June, extreme amounts of precipitation above average. I mean, we're talking 12 plus inches above average. Look at that, 19 plus inches above average when it comes to precipitation all the way from West Africa to portions of North, Central, South America. I mean, this is... If European were to show this or not, I would definitely be seeing, holy cow, we're going to be seeing an active MDR as early as June. Obviously, CANSIPS is somewhat reliable sometimes. But even if we go through June, July, and August, a ton of moisture, specifically in the middle of the MDR, perfectly where you see these storms blowing up. And not only that, we see a ton of precipitation as far as it goes up into the southeast or into the western Atlantic, getting up to possibly 2 to 3 inches above average. So it's going to be very concerning if we see some storms kind of going long track from the MDR, or these low pressures kind of developing into the MDR off Africa and later becoming tropical on their way. Obviously, there's still going to be time period of a lot of shear and a lot of dry Saharan desert dust, but I definitely do not see it being as frequent as it was last year. Once we get to July, August, September, we will start to see that drier kind of coming in. That's exactly what I was just talking about, possibly when it comes to the dust or just the monsoon season ending. But we're still keeping a lot of eyes on the Caribbean there, Gulf of Mexico, even just the central Atlantic, possibly some out-to-sea storms. And as you get later into September, October, November, you can kind of see it. It may not be like surprisingly like 2020 where you see the big storms in Central America, because it does look pretty unbearable moisture-wise for that time period. But obviously, it's still very far out. We're talking, let's see, what is it, the 5th month right now? So we're basically talking 5 to 6 months out when it comes to the end of the season there. And last but not least, let's go ahead and look at the CFS daily sea surface temperatures. And then I'll be looking at my maps, because I don't want to make this video too long here. But let's go ahead and look here. At the moment, we're seeing, let's go as far as the 26th of May. The 26th of May, and it does cut out here. Unfortunately, it does cut out, but we kind of want to keep a close eye on the MDR, because obviously, based on the model, it doesn't look too favorable for any development soon for the western Atlantic. But you do see we have a trend of very warm waters, at least what we can see, for the Caribbean, getting as possibly as high 3.4 degrees Celsius above average. Or no, I think this has got to be Fahrenheit. I think this is definitely going to be Fahrenheit. Yeah, 3 degrees possibly above average in Fahrenheit. And then you do see some pretty warm temperatures across the eastern Atlantic there, including right into the MDR there, anywhere from maybe 1 to maybe even as high as 2 degrees above average. And as we go later into June 1st, look at June 1st, we're going to start seeing some big trend of really warm waters there, as we can see off Africa and the Caribbean. So it looks like this trend's going to continue with these really warm SSTs. If those models are right, European, CFS, and Kansas are right, with the warm waters and the frequent moisture, it can definitely be not. I wouldn't say early start to the season, because I don't think we're going to be seeing like we saw last year with the 2 storms before June 1st. But I definitely do see possibly an active June and maybe a slightly active July. So I think this year's June could possibly be more involved with the MDR, because last June was kind of more involved with out-to-sea storms, because I believe we had Dolly, Edward, and that was really it. I think June only had 2 to 3 storms, and yeah, it was Dolly. June also had Cristobal. So we had 3 storms in June, as what I know. So 3 storms is, I believe, slightly above average, because I think June averages 1.5 storms, something like that. I don't know how you get a decimal, but I think June averages 1 to 2 storms. So that's slightly above average, though. But I do think this year with the look at the MDR, going by June 12th, June 15th, June 16th, all the way up to as late as June 26th, really warm temperatures as far as the Caribbean. And obviously, if this thing wasn't cutting out, we'd probably see a whole flow of warm waters from the MDR to the southeast coast of the United States and portions of the Caribbean. So I wish the thing didn't glitch out, but it looks like we're going to be seeing some really warm waters from now on to over a month out when it comes to the SSTs. So first things first, here to look at the activity overall throughout from June 1st and November 30th. Obviously, guys, do not take this 100%. I'm not a weather god. I can't see the future. So this is just overall looking at what we just saw on other models. Because I wouldn't show you guys everything that I look at to make these maps, because then this video will possibly be 30 to 40 minutes. And obviously nobody wants to watch a 30 to 40 minute video just to find out that it's going to be slightly above average. Obviously, you guys are people. You guys have lives. But here to look at the overall activity. So if you're in the purple, or if you're like in the coastal area of the purple, which includes the Mid-Atlantic coast and a New England coast, you guys can possibly have above average to slightly above average activity. So obviously this kind of more refers to the ocean itself. So obviously nobody lives in the middle of the ocean like right here, so it can't really apply for you guys. But if you guys are on the coastal area, for these areas you may see anything from average activity, whether it's 0 to 1 storm, or slightly above average activity. And just because you are in this shade and it says slightly above average doesn't mean you're going to get one storm additional above average, like landfall wise. Just overall, within this area, we may see an additional storm kind of out to sea. So this does not apply. Everything that I show does not apply for the coast. For example, very active. It can be very active just for the waters right here, but not for the actual coast. I mean, I hope that makes sense. But overall, in this purple shade area is going to be average, most likely track-wise, with the amount of storms we see in this area. But we may see slightly above average. But it's going to be, I'd say, mainly a wild card, basically. And you will see that at the end of the video here. If you are in the if you're in the pink here, you're going to be very active. So if we're looking at for some pretty big concerns for portions of the southeastern coast of the United States and the Caribbean, because if this year does verify to be an MDR year, you know what that means? Long track storms that head to the west, and that's why last year wasn't that big of a Caribbean season. Obviously, we had Laura, and Laura, and I mean, obviously we had Sally for the Bahamas, but I really can't remember many storms last year that actually went the Caribbean. I mean, Laura was definitely the most intense. Obviously, we had Marco in the Western Caribbean. But really, other than that, we didn't have much of a Caribbean year. It was mainly Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean, like between the Yucatan Peninsula and all that. So it really was not a Caribbean year last year, but that can definitely change this year, at least if it looks like it's going to be an MDR year. So if you're in the southeast coast of the United States and in that coastal area, whether it's Myrtle Beach, Savannah, Miami, Mobile, and you're right on the coast of that pink, don't freak out, because obviously, again, it doesn't mean you're going to get a ton of landfall. It just means over on this area, there could be a lot more storms than their average or typically. And in the red, we have on and off. And what that means is it's going to be on and off, really. That's exactly what it means here. I mean, we're not going to be seeing constant storms or constant dead activity. It's going to be, there's going to be times where it can be active, and there can be times where it's not really active at all. Obviously, I guess that can apply for every single one, but this specific region in general is the one where it's like you may see a very, very dead end of the part of the season, and a very active middle part of the season is just going to be very this can also be a wild card, really. I think this one's more of a wild card than that one. Let's now go ahead and look at the season hurricane numbers or probability. So this actually is this has not changed. I think this still applies. This is from my last one, which was a few weeks ago. I didn't change this one. This definitely is still, I guess, somewhat reasonable enough that I decided to keep it here. So season hurricane probability, like seeing hurricane landfalls or hurricanes in the area. So if you're in a coastal area, it means landfall. If it's in the middle of the ocean, it means in that area. So season probability. So in the orange is very, very low. So obviously there's a low chance we're going to be seeing any hurricanes kind of right off South America, early any hurricanes making landfall in Belize or near areas of northern Honduras, or there's going to be obviously a low chance of hurricane landfalls or hurricane in the area, and the Bay of Campeche as well. Low chance for any hurricanes in the area or hurricane landfalls in the southern Caribbean, including Jamaica, East Peninsula, and southeastern Cuba, as well. Very low threat for any hurricane landfalls or in the area near Savannah and northeastern and east central coast of Florida. Let's go ahead and look at the red. So likely it's a little bit step up here. So if you're in the red, whether it's a coastal area, so this includes areas like Texas, coastal areas of western Florida, coastal areas of much of the Caribbean, as well coastal areas there for the Carolinas in general, you guys can definitely possibly have a likely threat for maybe a hurricane landfall. This includes areas like the Carolinas, obviously, western Florida, much of all the Texas coast, and portion of Cuba, I believe the Virgin Islands. Actually, no, that's the Lesser Antilles there. Portion of Cuba, Puerto Rico, and portions of Central America. You guys definitely do have a little bit better chance of having hurricane landfalls. But overall, the whole red area, like all the way to the MDR, we do have a likely area for having hurricanes developing within the region and moving in these areas. And then last but not least, we do have the pink, which is very likely to have hurricane landfalls in the area or hurricanes within the region. So we do have a pretty good threat for hurricane landfalls within the north central Gulf of Mexico, including the western panhandle, all of Alabama, all of Mississippi coast, and actually all of Louisiana coast, as well, including southeastern and south central Florida, Miami, the Keys there. I do think there's definitely a good chance, whether this is an MDR year, to see some hurricane landfalls or hurricanes in the area into the Caribbean, specifically the northern and eastern Caribbean, including Cuba, Hispaniola, the Bahamas, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and that's basically it. So if this is an MDR, I just see like a similar track where we see the bullseye kind of being right to these areas right here. And obviously, if some kind of go out to sea or if some go kind of to the south, that's kind of why I have it shaped up like I do have it. Let's note this is as well the same as the last update, the seasonal number of storms in general, the number of storms like I see in the area or landfalls. Let me first start off just by saying, if you're in a yellow, for example, in Massachusetts, and you see 1 to 3, it doesn't mean there's going to be 1 to 3 storms making landfall. It just means there's going to be 1 to 3 storms within your area. Because again, there's a reason why this yellow does not go into the United States. It stays off the coast. So 1 to 3 storms in the area. So for example, Edward and Dolly will work for you guys because obviously it was just off the coast. Faye will count as obviously a landfall for you guys, but I mean still. Hope you guys got the point there before you guys yell at me for saying New York City's not going to get 3 landfalls. Obviously, I know that. At least I think I do. Who knows? It's 2021. Anything can happen. But the yellow is we're going to be seeing the least amount of activity storm-wise. Obviously, this includes portions of the western Gulf of Mexico and portions of the southwestern and south central and the deep South Caribbean, and as well for portions there of the deep North Atlantic there near Canada, as well as Central Atlantic. Just not too favorable to see that many storms. Obviously, we can see some that there's a reason why it's 1 to 3, because obviously there's a pretty good chance we're gonna have at least 2 to 3 storms that are out to sea from the MDR that do make their way up to the north like this, or if they go like up the east coast and make their way near Bermuda, etc. That's why it goes so high up to 3. In the red, we do have 2 to 4, so definitely a lot better chance for seeing some significant amount of storms across portions of the MDR and going into the Carolinas and southeast and much of the Caribbean. So we can definitely see 2 to 4 storms, at least 2 to 4 storms within these areas. And then in the pink, hot pink, we have 36 seasonal number of storms in these areas. And obviously, this means we have 36 storms within the Gulf of Mexico or 36 storms that move in the area near the Caribbean. So definitely keeping a very, very close eye on that. Obviously, don't freak out because of the numbers. Something that has changed, obviously, in my seasonal forecast is the number of hurricanes. This is definitely a pretty big change to my last forecast. So in the gray color, we have 0 to 1 hurricanes. This applies to the last one. 0 to 1, if you're in the coast, it can mean 0 to 1 hurricane landfalls. But if like it's in the middle of the ocean, it means 0 to 1 hurricanes within the area. So I do think there's a very low chance for having any hurricane landfalls in the mid-Atlantic and the northeast coast. And as well, I don't see too many hurricanes, 0 to 1 hurricanes for portions of the Bay of Campeche and the deep southwest and deep south Caribbean. In the yellow, I definitely do see a little bit of increase there, 1 to 2 coming all the way from the central MDR. So like I did say, if this were to be an MDR storm, there can definitely be at least 1 to 2 hurricanes or tropical storms that do become hurricanes before the Lesser Antilles, as well, watching at maybe 1 to 2 hurricane landfalls or hurricanes in the area near the Carolinas and even portions there of the Yucatan Peninsula. Within the red, 2 to 4 hurricanes possibly within the area, and then within the pink, the hotspot, 3 plus number of hurricane landfalls or storms within the area. And my overall forecast is the overall kind of just, I guess, summary is that in the blue, in the light blue color, active feeder. So this is going to definitely be an active part into the season if it verifies the MDR. It's definitely going to be a pretty big concern. I see at least for June, July, and August based on the models, and they're showing very favorable conditions within that time frame. September, I think at that point it'll kind of die off the favorable conditions. But active feeder, the MDR storms coming off coast of Africa as a result of the monsoon season. Let's just hope it does not bust with all the if like a big wave happened like last year in late June and last like a whole 3 weeks and cut off any activity in the central Atlantic. Obviously, we don't want to have big storms, but obviously we don't want to have like a big bust and no storms coming from the MDR. I mean, that sounds really bad. Like, I'm not wishing upon storms for the Caribbean, but you guys get what I mean. And then in the green color, we have at-the-sea storms. So we're going to be seeing definitely some frequent storms, possibly, whether it comes to the Bermuda High or anything else that drive these storms to the north. Obviously, that most likely to take part in the Bermuda High, bringing in these storms to the north here and kind of blocking them from going anywhere to the west here, and maybe this Bermuda highs as far east as like Bermuda itself, then that definitely attract those storms to go far to the north there. If we now look at the dark blue color, the darker shade, we do have a wild card, like I did say in the very beginning. When I show you guys my maps, it's gonna be a pretty big wild card for portions of the northwest Atlantic there, including the northeast coast of the United States. We're gonna have maybe one or two storms within the area. We're gonna have one landfall. It's very unknown at this point. In the yellow color, we have little activity. This includes the deep South Caribbean near South America, the deep Southwest Caribbean near Panama and Central America, and as well for portions of the southern Bay of Campeche. In the red, we have a pretty large area for the western Atlantic, looking at pretty active in general. It's going to be just pretty active, and overall, the whole season is going to be known as active. And in the pink color, we have the hot spot. So if you're in the hot spot area, it doesn't mean freak out. Obviously, this can be absolutely wrong. But I have confidence in this forecast. I don't have 100% confidence. I don't have 80% confidence. I have around 70% confidence that this could very well verify this forecast. Obviously, it's still pretty far out to do a whole forecast when it's talking about as far as November 30th. But I definitely think overall you guys will be the hotspot. Even if it doesn't mean you're going to be seeing extreme amounts of hurricanes, you still actually could be the hotspot of the season. I mean, who knows? I definitely don't see the hotspot being the Northeast. I don't see the hotspot being the Western Gulf of Mexico. I don't see the hotspot being the MDR. I don't see the hotspot being the North Southeast like the Carolinas. So I think overall, even if you don't see a super duper big season in this pink color, you're still gonna be the hotspot. Whether it's little storms, you guys are still going to be the overall most active portion of the Atlantic this year. And last but not least, let's go ahead and look at the amount of storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes I think can happen. This has as well updated here and actually have increased these numbers just a tad here. So I do think we can have anywhere from 16 to 24 storms. That's my pretty big range. Obviously, there can be more than 24. There can be less than 16. But overall, I think 16 to 24 is a pretty good range talking this far out. Hurricanes, 9 to 12. I think this used to be 9-13. No, was it 9-11 or something? I think this used to be 9-11. But now it's 9-12. I think I changed that. Actually, no, I think it was it 9-13? Either way, I think we'd be seeing anywhere from 9 to 12 hurricanes and 3 to 6 majors. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.